Before supermarkets, before refrigerators, before plastic packaging, sell by date, next day delivery, what did people actually eat? And how did they survive without any of it? The answer is stranger, more brutal, and more fascinating than you probably think. For most of human history, and we are talking hundreds of thousands of years, there were no farms, no shops, no food stored anywhere. If you wanted to eat, you went and you found something every single day. Early humans were hunter-gatherers, which sounds simple until you realise what that actually meant. You woke up with no guarantee of food. You spent most of your day either hunting animals which could kill you or searching for plants, roots, berries, insects, most of which you had to know by memory because eating the wrong one could be fatal. There were no recipes, no cookbooks. Knowledge about what was safe to eat was passed down through generations by word of mouth. If someone in your group ate something and died, someone else remembered not to eat that thing, and that was the food safety system. Meat was not a daily occurrence for most early humans, it was a prize. A successful hunt could feed a group for days. Failure meant going hungry. Bones were cracked open and the marrow was eaten. Organs were consumed immediately at the kill site before they rotted. Nothing was wasted because nothing could be wasted. Plants, roots, tubers, berries made up the majority of the diet for most hunter-gatherer groups, not because they preferred it, because it was reliable. You could find plants most days, you could not always find animals. Then, around 10,000 years ago, everything changed. Humans discovered agriculture. In a region of the Middle East known as the Fertile Crescent, modern-day Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and surrounding areas, people figured out that you could take seeds from wild plants, put them in the ground, and grow your own food. You didn't have to go looking for it anymore, you could just make it appear where you wanted to. And this was arguably the single most important discovery in human history. It changed everything about how humans lived, where they lived, how many of them there were, and what they ate. The first crops were things like wheat, barley, lentils, chickpeas. It was simple, storable, and reliable. Not exciting, but they kept people alive, and especially through winter, when there was nothing else to grow and nothing else to eat. And here is something important. The shift to farming did not immediately make life better. In many ways, it made it worse. Hunter-gatherers actually had a more varied diet than early farmers. They ate dozens of different plants, animals, fruits, and roots depending on the season. Early farmers ate whatever crop they were growing that year. If the harvest failed, they starved. If a disease wiped out the crop, everyone died. Farming also introduced something that hunter-gatherers rarely experience: famine. When your food source is one field of wheat and that field fails, there is nothing else. Hunter-gatherers could move, but farmers could not. But eventually, farming won because it could feed far more people on the same amount of land, and more people meant more power. Farming civilizations grew into cities, armies, empires. Hunter-gatherer groups could not compete in any way. So, for thousands of years after agriculture began, most ordinary people ate a diet that was monotonous by modern standards. Bread was the foundation of almost every single civilization. Ancient Egyptians ate bread at every meal. Roman soldiers were given a daily grain ration. Medieval peasants in England lived primarily on a fig bread-based porridge called pottage. Meat was expensive and rare for ordinary people. A peasant in medieval England might eat meat a handful of times a year, whereas wealthy people ate meat regularly. Poor people mostly did not. And this was true across almost every culture for thousands of years. Salt was one of the most valuable substances in the ancient world. Not because it tasted nice, even though it did, but because it preserved food. Before refrigeration, salt was the only real reliable way to stop meat and fish rotting. Roman soldiers were sometimes paid in salt, which is where the word salary comes from. Smoking, drying, fermenting, and pickling were the other main preservation methods. Cheese exists because someone figured out that milk, left to farming in the right condition, became something that lasted for months. And alcohol exists pretty much for the same reason. Fermented grain and fruit kept longer than fresh versions and was safer to drink than contaminated water. Every culture developed its own fermented food. Korea had kimchi, Germany had sauerkraut, Japan had miso. These were not just food preferences, they were survival strategies. The concept of fresh food being best is actually a very modern idea. For most of history, preserved food was considered superior because it meant security. Fresh food rotted within days, preserved food could last through winter. Spices were another obsession that modern people underestimate. Like pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves were worth way more than gold at various points in history, not because it made food taste better, although it did, but because it masked the taste and smell of the food that was going off. Because before refrigeration, eating slightly rotten food was just unavoidable, and spices made it survivable. The entire age of exploration, Columbus, Vasco da Gama, Magellan, was largely driven by the desire to find cheap trade routes to Asian spice markets. The modern world was shaped by the search for black pepper and nutmeg. Think about that the next time you season your food. Vegetables, we know them today, are largely a modern invention. Most vegetables have been selectively bred over centuries to look and taste the way they do now. Wild carrots were thin, white and bitter. Wild corn was a tiny grass with a few hard kernels. Ancient broccoli looked nothing like what you find in a supermarket today. Humans have been slowly engineering their own food supply for thousands of years. The potato changed everything for Europe. Introduced from South America in the 16th century, it could grow in poor soil, produced enormous calories per acre, and could be stored through winter. Within 2 centuries, it had become the staple food of large parts of Europe. The Irish population doubled in less than 100 years, largely because of the potato, and then the potato blight of the 1840s killed the crop, caused a great famine, and killed or displaced a quarter of Ireland's population. The dependence on a single food source that had saved millions ended up killing them, unfortunately. The first supermarket, as we understood it, a large self-service store selling a wide variety of food under one roof, opened in the United States in 1930, less than 100 years ago. Before that, people bought food from multiple specialist shops: butcher, baker, the greengrocer, the fishmonger, each selling only their specific products. And before the shops existed, most people grew and made most of their own food. A typical household in 18th century England would keep a vegetable garden, perhaps some chickens, a pig. They would have made their own bread, their own butter, preserved their own meat. Food was not something you bought, it was something that you produced. The average person in 1800 spent about 80% of their income on food. Today in the UK, that figure is about 8%. The modern food system, for all its problems, has achieved something genuinely extraordinary. It has made food cheap, abundant, and available all year round in a way that will be completely unrecognisable to almost every human who ever lived. Before supermarkets, eating well was the privilege of the wealthy. Ordinary people ate what was available and what was in season and what they could preserve. They went hungry all the time. They died from food-related illnesses all the time. They built entire civilizations, religions, trade routes, and wars all around the simple question of where the next meal was coming from. So the next time you walk through a supermarket and complain there's nothing to eat, remember that for most of human history, that sentence would have been absolutely unthinkable. Thank you.